The second one, which is the most difficult one, is, where are you going to get your funding from? You're not listed necessarily, and you've got to find your funding, but then you're trying to turn that science into something that looks like a product. So science isn't sellable, it isn't the end product. When you're looking at that middle one, you're starting to turn that into a product, so you need some commercial expertise come in to have a look at, well, what can we sell? And so this is when I came into Dimerix. We really got through that first piece. The previous administration did an amazing job. The science was proven, it looked good, it looked promising, but it wasn't a product. So my role coming in was to take what they had done and turn that into something that is sellable.
And so when you say an orphan disease, for people that don't know, orphans, essentially a very small subset of populations impacted by it. There's no standard of care and there's no existing product in market that is a rival, essentially.
So an orphan disease is a rare disease for which, if you think of US specifically, is under 200,000 people diagnosed with the disease. That makes it a rare disease.
Yeah.
Orphan drug designation is where you get because there is such a high unmet need, there's no treatment available on market, and these patients desperately need a treatment.
So from an investment standpoint, obviously it makes sense to invest in orphan designated diseases, and when we invest in oncology, it primarily is orphan diseases. With FSGS, there's about 220,000 people, I believe, globally that are impacted.
That are diagnosed at the moment.
Yeah, so clarify that. What does that mean?
When we say patient has been diagnosed, in FSGS specifically, diagnosis is by a surgical procedure called biopsy. As treatments are becoming available for the different types of kidney disease, there's been a number of products approved for a different type of rare kidney disease called IgA nephropathy. With these products becoming available, there are doctors now saying, okay, now it's worth finding out which kidney disease you've got. One of the things that is in a really interesting space at the moment is diagnostics with AI. The general principle there that the AI can really help with either the diagnosis or even the treatment prognosis, I think is phenomenal. And so I think that's a real opportunity for growth in that space at the moment.
We'll talk about a few things today. And in terms of Dimerix and some of the work that you've been doing, I think if you're involved in the Australian biotech space or the Australian small cap investment space as a whole, you probably have heard of Dimerix. It's one of those companies that you just can't miss. And I think we were talking earlier, you probably would have done at least a couple of interviews a week for at least 12 months.
Yes.
And so for those that are listening, a bit of context, I suppose, is that we're not going to be talking about some of the things you heard in those interviews. This is not going to be a quick rapid fire with Nina Webster about Dimerix. This is what I'm going to get out of this session is to understand who you are, why you're doing what you're doing, why people that probably have no idea who you are or have no idea what you're doing should care about what you're doing. The first time I met you, this was, I think, in 2022. And we got up. I remember you came to our old office. You ride in on your bike with your leather jacket and your bike boots, much like you've done today. And I go, okay, let's talk about this. Your journey has been something that, biotech enthusiasts, small cap investors, and everyone like has followed, but I don't think people know enough about. So let's go back to the start.
Sure.
Where did this passion start?
It's an interesting career path, I think. I am one of 4 girls, no brothers, and grew up, as you can probably tell from the accent, in the United Kingdom. I guess I've always had a little bit of a risk-taking in me. And I originally grew up wanting to be a stunt woman, of all things, which probably can feed through to some of my activities like coming in on a motorbike today or going skiing. But as I went through my career, I eventually decided I actually would like to be a paramedic. The challenge is that when you're 18 in the UK at that time, you had to be 21 to drive an ambulance. So I was told, go away for a few years and come back when you're 21. So I actually started a full-time career at age 18 with Big Pharma as a trainee lab technician. So this was the most junior person in the laboratories, where fortunately, Big Pharma at that time sponsored people to do their degrees. So I actually had the opportunity to study pharmacology, which was a passion of mine, while working at Big Pharma for a number of years. And that really just changed that career, because by the time I hit 21, I then had a degree in pharmacology. I worked full-time, did my degree part-time, 1 day a week. We'd all go off to university, and the rest of the time we'd make up the hours in the laboratories. So it was a very different career start in getting into pharmaceuticals.
That's crazy. Let's talk. Can we go back a step? Let's talk about you being a stunt woman. How did this come about?
I think I grew up, and many people may see this, I was quite a tomboy. And so I grew up, I had what's called a striker bike, which was like the bike before a BMX sort of style. I grew up, my friends around me were all the boys. So we would build up the ramps and we would do all these stunts and jump off the ramps with our bikes. I played soccer, so I was in the soccer team at school as well, and sort of grew up.
Come on, you're from the UK, you can't say soccer.
I think I've been here so long now, but
Managers.
I know, it's like to football. No, I grew up playing soccer, and it was I spent a number of years doing that. I played under 18 soccer for Portsmouth ladies. Did a number of international matches as well. But through that process, I think growing up with those around me, it was a lot of fun doing a lot of those high rise, climbing lampposts, that sort of thing. Yes.
I reckon we would have been good friends in school. So, what was growing up in Cardiff like?
Well, I actually grew up in the south coast of England.
Okay.
And so this, if you think of the south of England, a lot of people will think of the White Cliffs of Dover. Mm-hmm. Well, those White Cliffs actually go all the way along the south coast of England. So I did have the White Cliffs behind me. And that was somewhat a sheltered sort of upbringing, because it was a village. We didn't have a big population or a big school. And our class size, it's my first primary school, class size was 10 people in the primary school. It was quite small. We had the sea in front of us. Over the other side was France, of course, and behind us the cliffs, which meant we didn't get extreme weather either. It was somewhat sheltered. But then going through childhood, going through schooling there, I then got my first big job at age 18. Actually, prior to that, I was a full-time lifeguard, which a lot of people would not know either. I actually did a year of full-time lifeguarding, which sounds really strange because I lifeguarded on the beaches of England, which is not quite like the beaches of Australia. There's a lot of stones and cold weather involved and cold water when you have to go out. But again, that was quite an experience. And it was actually when I was working at Big Pharma and I wanted to get a promotion, but I hit this glass ceiling where they said, well, you don't have a PhD, could not get the promotion. And that is what actually triggered me to go back to Cardiff, which is you mentioned earlier, went to Cardiff to study my PhD. So that's the only, of all my education, the only time I've been a full-time student is for my PhD. Everything else has been working full-time. So despite those letters after my name, I've not been a perpetual student.
How about that? So when people think about, because obviously when you say Dr. Nina Webster, you assume that this is somebody who's followed a traditional path. But I know, because I know you, that you have a path that is anything but traditional, including some of the jobs that you did while you were studying.
Yes.
Can we go back to that for a second? Let's talk about what was that journey like through your undergrad, through your grad? What did you do to put yourself through college? How was that?
Yeah, so my first degree, pharmacology, I was actually sponsored by Big Pharma. And so I would work 4 days a week, longer hours, because you had to make the hours up. And then 1 day a week, we would go up to university, spend a day. And the day was contact hours. We had to be there by 8 a.m. and we couldn't leave till 9 p.m. So it was all done in 1 day. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, the drive was a couple of hours. So we would leave the house at 5:30 in the morning to get there in time. So it was long days. But that, the benefit of that was it really was paid for by the Dean Lana, which was an opportunity. When I then went back to Cardiff, which was my full-time studying position, to supplement that, I actually got my bus driver license and I drove bus. So yes, I know a few people may have heard that somewhere whispering around. It is true, and it did supplement my income while I was studying for my PhD.
Do you have your truck license here as well?
No, I don't. Just the car and the motorbike in Australia.
Well, and you do a few other things, including underwater things. That's a bit about how did you get involved in scuba? When did that start?
So I got involved in scuba when I was at Cardiff University. So I was studying for my PhD, and part of that was driving the bus. So I was actually using some of the university buses. I was driving some of the sports clubs around as part of that role as well, and I was paid to do that. And in one of those, it was the scuba club, which I thought, this sounds really cool. So I'd started through that process of, because I was an older student, I'd been to work and then came back to study.
Yeah.
It meant not only that I was old enough to have the license, I was also put forward through the instructor training. So I ended up being a scuba instructor for the university students as well. And that's boded me really well, because when I came out to Australia, best way to make friends, I was here on my own, me and my one suitcase. It was an opportunity to make friends, meet people. In fact, that's actually how I met my husband in Australia. He was also a scuba instructor.
How amazing.
Yeah.
And he was a dive master also?
He was a scuba instructor as well. We use British, so our cook-up is our training rather than the paddy, yes. Yeah. But ironically, I came all the way to Melbourne and I met and married an Englishman.
Scuba is an amazing community. Like, I got my open water license a few years back, and it's every time you go out, you meet so many cool people.
Yes, from all walks of life. And I think, it's an environment where it doesn't matter what your education is, what your background is, you're all doing the same thing with the same passion, and you rely on each other. And it's really important. So a lot of trust between those buddy groups when you're going out. So I think that was a really opportunity to make a really diverse set of friendships. But I think I've always approached careers with just always having backup plans. And for those who do know me, I know you know me quite well, I'm a list structured person. I like to follow rules and plans and so forth. And so I had my scuba instructor certificate in case I ever needed to teach that. I also had my swimming instructor certificate, my basketball coaching certificate, my soccer teaching certificate, and they were all my backup careers in case biotech fails.
I love that. I mean, that's amazing. I think any of those I could see you doing really well. But have you made good use of your license? When was the last dive?
I actually have not dived for a number of years now. I think when we had the children, I have two children. When we had the children, of course, your risk profile changes.
Yeah.
So when we were diving pre-marriage, pre-children, we were doing deep technical diving, so big gases.
Yeah.
And of course, that does increase your risk profile. So when the children came along, we decided actually that we need to change some of that, or I felt I needed to change my risk profile. And that's why we really took up the skiing.
Yeah.
Because the skiing is something you can really do as a family. So we could go over, when they were younger, in nappies, they could go do snow play while we did skiing. They've both been on skis since they were 3. So they're now, they're both two teenagers. It does mean that we can go on these holidays and actually have a family trip.
Yeah.
Which makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk a bit, going back to your PhD, that was in pharmacology.
Yes, it was in pharmaceutics. Specifically, it was looking at drug delivery through the skin. It's called transdermal drug delivery.
Yeah, and what was your thesis project on that?
So my thesis project was looking at, of all the things, jasminates as percutaneous penetrators, which basically means using jasminates, which is a typical a certain structure, delivering drugs through the skin, and how it follows that pathway.
Yeah, okay. And that was you decided to then go work after your PhD. Was that in parallel? Were you working what?
No, so I was working with Wyeth originally, and I was working in initially in the microbiology labs, but then I moved into the new product development.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really good grounding to what I do today, because not only was I fairly junior, so I was working in the laboratories with the teams, I was doing formulation development, so I understand all of the ingredients, if you like, that you're putting into your various drug products. Stability testing, analytical testing, but also tech transfer, so taking something that we had done at pilot scale on the bench and then turning that into something that was scalable, commercial, working down in the full-scale commercial suites with various individuals there. So that really was a great grounding from that perspective. It's only when I then went over to Cardiff that comes in.
So let's break this down for people that don't know. With respect to drug development, let's talk about drug formulation firstly. What are all of the ingredients in this recipe?
So when we talk about drug delivery, or you've got drug discovery and then you've got drug delivery. So drug discovery is where you're really inventing the actual molecule that's the active ingredient. Drug development is you're taking that molecule that's been discovered and turning it into a product. And so when you're looking at that, we call that the active pharmaceutical ingredient, or API, and it comes in with a number of what we call excipients, which basically the ingredients. And you think of it like it is a recipe, baking a cake. So you've got all of the key ingredients that go in to make that product. But when you're in that process, whatever you're using, you have to make sure is scalable. You can do it on a commercial scale, and that means, and an example is when I came into Dimerix originally. The original formulation, the prototype formulation, was hand-filled at a bench.
Okay.
You could not put that into a commercial machine and run that at thousands of tablets an hour, but you just can't do that. So we had to then reformulate to make sure that recipe, if you like, is something that could be used at a full scale to be able to do the however many thousands of...
And why is that? So is that because of the PK/PD profile changing at scale, or like...
No, a lot of it's to do with, so an example, when some of these products it could be flowability. So it might be that if your active ingredient, think of talcum powder, it clumps together. So if you try to move it off a spoon, it jumps in clumps. You want something that flows really smoothly. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get a uniform delivery across that. Because if you were trying to get, a certain amount in each of those capsules, and it was clumping in one and then missed one and then clumped again, you've got to have something that is really smooth.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And so when you go through that process at Wild, that's obviously something that's... how old are you at this stage?
I was 18, 19 when I was there.
That's a great experience too. And were there any things that stood out to you through your time at Watt where you went, I think this is something that I want to pursue as a career and incorporate into my career?
It's funny. I think ultimately, yes. It was a process where I saw all of a sudden I didn't go back to doing ambulance and paramedic. I could see my career going through that pathway. I enjoyed the formulation work. I think I enjoyed the diversity in it as well. And this is unusual to say for Big Pharma, because often in Big Pharma, it comes in one door, you do your bit, and it goes off to the next department, and you don't see it anymore. And there is certainly a strong element of that. But in the role that I was in, because we did the tech transfer, or technical transfer, it meant that I could spend time not just in the pilot plant or in the laboratory, but in the full-scale commercial suite. I'd spend a day on the packaging lines with the teams down there. And that was a phenomenal experience, a lot with very experienced people who've been doing it for years. And that gave me eye-opened me at the different types of career paths within pharmaceutical. And again, put that to perspective, when somebody's coming out, finishing their degree for the first time, how do you know within pharmaceutical what roles are available? There's quality, pharmacology, analytical testing, regulatory, clinical, it's all the different non-clinical, all the different areas, and you don't know what's there until you're in it. You can actually see that, and I think that gave me a great opportunity to see all the different types of careers that could be done in pharmaceutical.
Is that common, like getting that sort of exposure?
Not common, especially in Big Pharma, because often in Big Pharma you're siloed within your division. But I think it was an opportunity because of the role I was in, and because a part of tech transfer we actually had to deal with all the different areas, regulatory as well, as we were feeding that into dossiers for regulatory. I just got experience. Could I do those jobs? No. But it meant I understood what was involved and which areas needed to touch it at which point.
That's very interesting. What was it like? How were you managing your time, though, when you were doing that? Because you're obviously working, as you mentioned, 4 long days, and then you're going to university. You're also doing, few other things, presumably at the time extracurricular.
Yeah, but you put it into a perspective. I didn't have a family then, so it was just me. And that was an opportunity to manage the time quite effectively. I've always enjoyed studying. You can probably tell by all the different things I've done. Every single time I do one of these courses, though, I do promise it's the last time, never again. But every time I do something else. And I just enjoy it. That is where I get a lot of that passion. And actually, downside is learning both sides of things.
So when did you move here?
I moved here in 2001. I actually did come to Australia in the year 2000. While I was doing my PhD, my sister and I decided to backpack. And it was the Olympics in Sydney, and we had some tickets to some events. So we thought we're going to backpack through Australia and then back through Hawaii, back to the UK. A lifetime opportunity. And who knew that a year later that I was going to move here, not just for the 12 months that was originally planned, but 24 years later I was still here.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's a bit like that. Like I came here for my master's degree.
Yes.
And same thing. Did you dive here when you were backpacking?
Yes, I did, absolutely. Did the continental shelf, went out on some of those liveaboards. And in fact, because they were short on instructors, I actually instructed while I was backpacking as well. So it actually paid some of my way through Australia as well. But then when I moved, it was always to Melbourne. And I think that came back from my PhD being in transdermal drug delivery. At that time, there was a company that had just started up in Melbourne working in delivering products through the skin. Mm-hmm. I actually just got a phone call out of the blue. I was coming to the end of my PhD. I was writing up my thesis, and I was asked, would I like to do 12 months in Australia? And I thought, 12 months in Australia sounds like an amazing holiday. Yeah. And so I took them up on that, arrived literally with one suitcase, never met anybody. It was just a phone call. They'd arranged temporary accommodation and a year's contract, originally working for the company but through Monash University. So it was like a three-way relationship. And then within 3 months they asked, could I stay longer? And they got me my permanent residency, and the rest is history.
Amazing. And you also then went on to do your master's in IP law and then an MBA.
Yes.
That's a pretty lateral shift from pharma. I mean, not so much, but in the sense that it's a very clear, I suppose, direction that I want to look at this from a business lens.
Yeah, and I think I've always known that I was probably more commercially orientated than science orientated. And what I like to define it as I'm not a true scientist, because a true scientist does it for the love of the science. Wouldn't it be nice to know? Yeah. Whereas my angle, even when I was doing my PhD, was, yes, but can we sell it at the end of the day? What can we do? Yeah. And so when I think about, is it a true scientist or not? I am not a true scientist. I understand the language, but I am not a true scientist. And I think when I came over to Australia, it was opportune time. I mentioned there was a company, it was called Accolades. It was very successful a number of years ago. And part of that success was I came out originally as a senior scientist. I was actually inventor of the product that went global, a product called Axerol. And through that process, we were a very small team, and they asked, could somebody look after the intellectual property? And I said, sure, I can look after the intellectual property, but I'm not quite sure what I need to do. So they said, okay, we'll send you on a course. So I worked full time, and I studied evenings and weekends for my master's in law to make sure I understood and how to manage the intellectual property effectively. Through that process, I prosecuted the patents for the product that I had invented. And then it got to the point of, okay, we're now through clinical trials, we're looking at licensing this product. I joined the commercial team, I became business development director. And in that process was looking at, okay, now we need to license. We licensed with Eli Lilly, and they offered me the opportunity to the MBA side of things, again, working full-time and studying evenings and weekends. And so I did that in the background to give me the full-rounded position on negotiations, licensing, contracting, alliance management, etc. The unusual thing, though, was with that MBA is just towards the very end of it is when I had my first child. And so that was somewhat of a struggle, that MBA, because some of those exams, because she came early, I literally did the exam when she was 4 days old. Sat outside the room, and every time they cried, they stopped the clock, let me feed. I would come back, they'd start the clock, and off I went on my exam again. And I still passed. And it was the lowest grade I got, but I was so just pleased I passed it. Yeah, well done. Well done. I reckon I would have probably got the lowest grade without any of that happening. so well done to you. Let's go back. Let's unpack that a bit, because that sounds like some really good exposure and pretty pivotal exposure that I think, speaks to how you run Dimerix today. What were some of the key takeaways from one, being part of the research, development, and invention process, but then having to get to be in the room at the table in the field, make these sort of things? Well, I think for me it was probably a natural transition. I had the science, I understood the science really well. It was actually in the subject of my PhD, so I was deep knowledge technically. When I learned the intellectual property language, of course, when we're doing licensing agreements, it is a lot of it's around the intellectual property, the patents, the trademarks, the know-how. And so having understood that language as well, it put me in a really strong position to be able to be part of that negotiating team, the contracting team, and doing some of that business development, because I could talk in deep knowledge, especially through due diligence with these parties and bringing them over. So I think it really put me in a really strong position. I think also during that process, because again, when it's a small company, you end up fingering all the different pies. Through that process, I'd been project manager for a clinical trial project I've been, I've written regulatory documents, and I've been involved in each of the steps along the way. And as I mentioned before, that does not mean that I'm the expert in any of those things by any way, but it means I do know what needs to be done. Mm-hmm. And so now, creating that to Dimerix, it was an opportunity to say, well, I know these things need to be done, and I know somebody who's really good at that, and bringing them into the company. So one of the real opportunities I've had is when I joined Dimerix, we were only 3 people, so it was a really small team. Mm. And it was an opportunity for me to now build that team and build the capability and expertise with people I know who are very good at what they do. So what I have done really is surround myself with people who are far smarter than me, and that is why we are seeing the success, is because they are good at what they do as well.
But don't sell yourself short, because that's the best thing a manager can do.
Absolutely. I think it's a team effort. Their success is my success. Absolutely. My success is their success.
Yeah, that's great. Let's go back a step there. So you're at Acrux. What was the process like from getting into the IP side of things, learning management, then you move on to Immuron, where again you're handling IP for Immuron as well. Then you come back to Acrux. What was that move to and back?
Yeah, so that was a really interesting time because we were riding an all-time career high with Acrux. We had just signed, at that time, the largest biotech deal in Australian history. We had a global licensing deal with Big Pharma. We were cashed up because the upfront was significant. And so it was a phenomenal position, but it was equally put the company in an unusual position where it finished the clinical trial, it had product on market, it had a partner who was now going to do everything behind the scenes. And so they actually made a lot of people redundant, including myself. Mm. And so through that redundancy process, it always comes as a shock. Doesn't matter where you are and what you're doing, rationally it's a strong business decision. It's always feels personal in the moment. Yeah. It's not, but it will feel it. And that was actually, I think, helping me on career growth as well, because it actually made me step back and think, well, hang on, what else can I do? And the Immuron opportunity came up, not just from the IP, but actually I was managing their commercial licensing, so taking some of their products overseas as well, working on their R&D programs, so managing the R&D programs as well. So it was a bit of managing all of the different facets in that business as well. And that worked perfectly for me because I had a second child during that period, and it meant that I could work part-time and from home. So I actually did 10 years of part-time work through that process until the youngest started school. And I think that then gave me, again, the new exposure. So Immuron, the extension I got there was capital raising, investor relations, a lot of exposure through that. So then Acrux asked me to come back to them. They had a number of different activities that were then growing where I had the key expertise, so they brought me back into Acrux. Worked perfectly for me around my family life and time because I came back part-time again. And then I was managing the strategic alliances and building up that process as well.
How old were the kids when you went back full-time?
The youngest started school, he was 6.
6, okay.
Yes.
That's cool. Do you think it's a bit different, like being a woman, being in the field, and perhaps at the start of your career, having to juggle both family and career in the same way? Do you feel it's a bit different for men and women in that sense?
I think back when I was going through that, yes, I would say that's fair. Yeah. That it's always a challenge in maintaining your position if you're going to take time out with your family. Yeah. And I was really, really fortunate that I managed to hold my role part-time, and for the first 12 months actually working from home. Which meant that when I did come back full-time, I took the double whammy of taking the Dimerix role on as well. Mm. And I was able to do that because I kept my career ticking through. But that's not always possible. Yeah. So there is a lot of disadvantage in taking that time out. One thing that has changed a lot, though, is, around or since COVID, but even before COVID, some of this was coming in. And that's the ability to have hybrid models and work from home. And I think this has been an absolute game changer because now it's more family friendly. You think our industry specifically, pharmaceutical industry, we deal a lot with Europe, US. So we have calls at 6 a.m, we have calls at 10 at night, depending on the time zone we're dealing with, which actually means that we've got a lot of flexibility during the day if we need to do a school drop, or if we need to go to an activity or a parent-teacher afternoon or anything like that. So I actually think, whilst it sounds like it's long days, it actually works really well. And I think, put that into perspective, what does my daily life look like? Well, I'm usually on emails by 6 a.m. I usually work 6 till 8. My husband leaves at 6:30. He's out the door. At 8 o'clock I stop. I'm doing school lunches, school drops, getting all the kids done. I'm back again at my desk by 9. I work the day. Fortunately, my husband, because he's worked early, he's home by 4, so he does the swimming and the tennis and the things after school. And then I have dinner on the table at 5:45, 6. Then kids are eaten, they have their bath or shower or whatever, get themselves ready for bed, and then I'm back on calls by 8:30, 9 p.m. And so whilst that sounds like it's a long day, from 6 till sort of 10 when we finish the last call, it works really well because you can work it around family life.
What do you want to say to people that maybe discount the work you're doing because you look a certain way or because you are a certain type of person? What does that make you feel like?
Yeah, so again, I do think it's changing, and it's slow to change, but I do think it's changing. And I'll put that into perspective I went to my first US Bio conference, for example, and I went to a CEO conference around that time as well. And I was the only female in the room, or hundreds of males. So it was definitely, you stand out, you are different. But I actually think that it has never perturbed me. I've never seen that as a particular challenge. I've always just done my thing and got on with it. But I think, there are certain behaviours that I've had to tolerate over the years, in navigating my way through. I like to think that with the change that we're forcing now, the ability to speak up, I was taught very much when I was 18 and 19 in Big Pharma, you don't make a noise or you lose your job. So you have to, just suck it up.
Yeah.
Whereas now, when I think of my children and my daughter, but my son, even more important, is that this normalises that we can, women, men, whoever can be in these roles. Doesn't matter. We're all capable, to then a CEO in a pharmaceutical, a mum is a CEO, it's just normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we're trying to instill in these people is that it is normal.
Yeah. Did they ever come with you to any of your talks that you give or functions or anything like that if they've seen you in that sort of setting?
No, more recently they have seen a few of the YouTube videos, and they do find that quite hilarious. I think for years they felt that their dad did all of the real work because it was tangible, and mum just played on a computer all day.
Yeah.
But they've now really got a sense of what I do, and so they've seen a few of the videos and they've shown their friends. So I think they've got a certain amount of pride in what I do now.
Well, if you're watching this, guys, your mom's a badass, so you should be proud. But let's talk about. So I want to talk about a couple of things today, but one thing that I really want to talk about is APAC Biotech. It seems to me that a lot of companies are coming here from overseas. They come here to do their phase 1 trial, they get their R&D refund, and they say thank you very much and, see you later. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think for very early stage, I think that's a fair point for phase 1, for example, because we have not just the R&D TATs, but we also have the CTN scheme, that's a clinical trial notification scheme.
Yeah.
So for an example, for those listening, in the US, you have to do an IND, investigation of your drug. There's a lot of things that you need to put in place before you can open an IND in the US.
Yeah.
In Australia, the list of what you need to achieve is actually a little bit shorter. So it's faster to get into a clinical trial in Australia than it is anywhere else in the world. And so there is an advantage to doing that in this industry here. But once you get to sort of phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials in any indication really, it's very hard to recruit in Australia. And that's two things. One is we just don't have enough people. And I think the second thing is when you're looking at US, in particular, the other territories, you actually have to have a certain percentage of the population that represents that territory, which we can't always do in Australia. And so I think it's got a natural limitation. Our phase 3, for example, we're running in 21 different countries around the world. So you get a true representation from the global community. So I think that's where I think the opportunity is early stage, but it naturally digresses elsewhere. And I think the other component, which is a challenge for Australia, which is a big challenge, is financing. In US, there's a lot of the equity or venture capital that you can access.
Yeah.
In Australia, that venture capital doesn't really exist in the same way. So that is why companies often invest earlier than they probably should, because it was the only way they could really raise capital. Once you come out of university, you get your original funding from the university and government grant, then there's this big gap in the middle of how do you fund that before you can really get into clinical trials, etc. So there is certainly a lot of hamstrung ability to get through and navigate that pathway from innovation into commercialization. And that's why, again, we see a lot of products invented in Australia but go offshore quite early, which is why it's unusual. You can count on one hand how many companies in Australia are doing a phase 3 clinical trial.
Yeah, not many. Yeah, in fact, I think you're one of the few Australian biotechs that's got a phase 3 live at the moment.
Yes, correct, yeah.
But why do you think that is? Is it a structural problem? And I suppose the bigger question is, going forward, how do we actually retain value from an Australian standpoint if these drugs come here? And I'm not saying they're gaining the system, but in effect, if they're getting some form of advantage, how does ultimately the benefit of that advantage trickle back down to Australia?
Yeah, and to me, I think it really does come into the funding question. If we get that funding question correct. Now, we talk about having the right expertise in Australia. Do we have the right people? Can we retain the right people? But there's a double-edged sword here, because if you haven't got the funding, you can't afford to employ the person that you really want, especially if they're from overseas and they're going to cost more to be able to retain them. And so a lot of the time when you build up the expertise in Australia, where do they go? Overseas, because where the money is. And that's who can afford to employ them. So there is I think this is my personal opinion, is that we need to address the funding question, which will then naturally be able to, if we can fully fund companies, they can have sufficient capital to be able to invest in people, in resources, and actually retain that skill set into Australia.
What's the major avenue of funding that we can look at?
Again, good question. I'm actually putting my other hat on for a moment. I'm a chair of a fund called Synthesis Bioventures, and that is actually a fund trying to address this problem. And that is by raising sufficient capital and then investing in these early stage biotechs so that these companies can really get as far down the path, potentially into that phase 2 and beyond, before they either need to list on the stock exchange or go overseas. And so that is very much trying to address that problem.
Do you think super funds have a role to play?
In investing in some of these early biotechs, the difficulty is, and again, I'm just putting my devil's advocate on here, is a lot of super funds will need liquidity events. And of course, when you're investing in these small, early stage private companies, the liquidity isn't there.
Absolutely. And this is something that obviously we look at all the time. I mean, we're looking at, I think life science is probably the most active deal flow area for me personally. I'm probably looking at a couple of companies a week. And we're mostly saying no for this reason, because either they're, too early and they don't even have any real phase 1 data. If they've got a phase 1 data, then either it's too expensive to do a phase 2, or there's no liquidity event. And if they do want to stay private, then it's probably the same thing. We want to go to the US. So it's a bit of a catch-22. And I wonder what that means for the Australian biotech and life sciences space as a whole, because I think life sciences, is one of the best performing sectors over the last decade. We've seen obviously amazing companies like Dimerix, Cochlear, and Neuron, Dimerix come out of the sector. Do you feel net positive over the next decade?
Yes, I do. I think a huge amount of opportunity. Not only are we recognizing these challenges, which means we can do something about them and then start addressing those. But I think, to your point, there's been a number of success stories, and we need success stories in this industry to feed success, because it increases confidence in the sector. And so a win for another company is a win for all of us in this sector, because it does mean that it's just increasing confidence across the board, not just in the funding, in the resourcing, attracting talent from overseas, and building that capability. So it is very much an opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, Acrox has been, used to be an amazing company. We've invested in it, previously. And some of the really, I would say, pioneers of Australian biotech today have come out of it that's stable. Whether it's John from Neuron or you, and, he was doing some amazing work with his stuff. When you come into Dimerix now, and this was in 2018?
Yes.
Yeah. the company's already been around for about 15 odd years at this stage. Now it's been around for 20 years or so, I believe.
Yes.
What's going on in your head when you're stepping in 2018? Do you feel like, oh, there's a bit of legacy here, there's a bit of hangover? What are you thinking?
So I think it's a natural transition period, and I think when you look at any company, and I think of it as you've heard of the expression valley of debt. I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
I think it was three valleys of debt, and this is where each valley, it comes back to my point before of the first valley is you're getting your funding from university or for government, and you're really just proving the principle of the science. Does the science work? The second one, which is the most difficult one, is, where are you going to get your funding from? You're not listed necessarily, and you've got to find your funding, but then you're trying to turn that science into something that looks like a product. So science isn't sellable it isn't the end product.
Yeah.
And so turning that into that section. And then the third one is, you've got your final formulation, you're getting deals on the table, you're closer to the finish line, you're typically listed in one country or another. And so that's again a smaller valley. So it's that middle one which I think is the big opportunity. And when you transition from each one to the next one, you've got to think of it as not just about that funding piece, it's also the skills and expertise that's required.
Yeah.
And so in that early stage, it's science driven. So predominantly the staff are going to be scientists. When you're looking at that middle one, you're starting to turn that into a product. So you need some commercial experience, expertise come in to have a look at, well, what can we sell? And I'll give you a ridiculous example here is, I can make it blue, but I can only sell it if it's red. No, so can you make it red? And so you need to make sure you've got your, what we call target product profile is correct, that it's actually got a target market there as well. So it's a different skill set. And then that final hurdle can be a different skill set again. Now you're looking at building up commercial capability of pricing, reimbursement, sales, marketing, partnering, commercial contracts, etc. And so each time you tip into that, you often will see a change in management.
Yeah.
And so this is when I came into Dimerix. We really got through that first piece. The previous administration did an amazing job. The science was proven. It looked good. It looked promising, but it wasn't a product. So my role coming in was to take what they had done and turn that into something that is sellable.
Yeah.
And that was really what I was brought in to do. And through that, fortunately, through my background, is I've been on the full end scale as well, so I can actually do both those last pieces as well and take it right through to market. Which is an opportunity. And it comes back to what you mentioned before, the experience we had at Acrux in taking a number of products from inception all the way to market there. The teams that were successful in doing that, when the Acrux team disbanded, a number of those went to Neuron, including John Butcher there, and a number of them came with me to Dimerix. So much like Neuron, we have teams that really have done this before.
And I know the guys who were there before you, James and Liddy with Uva, and there's a bit of history on this drug, right? So I want to talk about the kidney disease indication. So in 2020, I believe it was, the stock ran from, I think it was at 9 or 10 cents all the way up to 80 cents.
So 7 cents.
7 cents to 80 cents.
It was about late 70s, but there or thereabouts,
Yeah, and then it fell down just as quick. Why?
So we saw a number of different successes as we were going through that. We had some fantastic phase 2 data in NSGS. We hit all of our endpoints in that.
Yeah.
That looked amazing. And that is what gave us the confidence going into phase 3. When we look at that phase 2 data specifically, the current standard of care is century of blood pressure medication. Patients do have blood pressure with kidney disease. And by adding our drug on top, we basically doubled the impact for these patients. That was a phenomenal outcome. Then a few months later, we read out on a different study, different indication, different disease called diabetic kidney disease. Now, that data, again, showed really encouraging support. In fact, by the end of the study, 30% of patients no longer had diabetic kidney disease. However, it didn't get the primary endpoint with statistical significance.
Okay.
And so that lost a lot of confidence for some of those investors, which is a shame because actually it did exactly what a phase 2 is supposed to do, which is rule out which population is the best population, which one's it working in, and how is this coming through. So it actually is, it was still a very, very good outcome. Now, on the back of both of those, of course, we've gone through with FSGS. And why do we choose FSGS above everything else? And that is because FSGS is a rare disease. It's an orphan indication. And that comes with a number of different advantages. The main one being, of course, there is nothing approved on market, but it means we only need to do one phase 3 clinical trial, and there are pricing advantages with that as well. The flip side is diabetic kidney disease. Could we move into that? Yes, we believe we still could. We still actually see some very strong data come out of that study. However, it's not a rare disease, which means, first of all, you have to do 2 large phase 3 clinical trials. You probably want to do that with a partner who are doing it. And the second part of that is pricing. It's not rare disease, which means you have to use standard branded pricing, which would cannibalize your orphan product.
Right. Okay. There's a few things you mentioned there that I want to unpack, and mostly for people that probably don't have a clinical background. Let's talk firstly just around a clinical trial. So there's about 3 phases of a clinical trial, and simply put, phase 1 is just establishing that your drug's safe. So it's not, it doesn't have what's called as an adverse impact on your body, so the toxicity levels basically. You basically establish its bioavailability in your blood, so you get your PK/PD profiles. Your phase 2 is talking around efficacy and getting efficacy data, and phase 3 is essentially getting efficacy data at scale. Is that fair?
That's fair. Phase 1 is typically in healthy volunteers because it's just looking at safety.
Yeah.
And then phase 2 is in the patient population, looking at safety with a bit of efficacy. Mm-hmm. And phase 3 is looking at a much bigger population at efficacy and safety.
And so when you say an orphan disease, for people that don't know, orphans, essentially a very small subset of populations impacted by it. There's no standard of care, and there's no existing product in market that is a rival, essentially.
So that's orphan drug designation, correct. So an orphan disease is a rare disease for which, if you think of US specifically, is under 200,000 people diagnosed with the disease. That makes it a rare disease.
Yeah.
And then orphan drug designation is where you get because there is such a high unmet need, there's no treatment available on market, and these patients desperately need a treatment. You can get the orphan drug designation, which gives you the benefits of regulatory pricing and the exclusivity that comes with it as well.
Yeah. So from an investment standpoint, obviously it makes sense to invest in orphan designated diseases, and when we invest in oncology, it primarily is orphan diseases. With FSGS, there's about 220,000 people, I believe, globally that are impacted.
That are diagnosed at the moment, yes.
Yeah, so clarify that. What does that mean?
So, and this is where that when we say patient has been diagnosed, in FSGS specifically, diagnosis is by a surgical procedure called biopsy.
Yeah.
Take a sample of the kidney. And so what's happened in kidney disease generally over the last 20, 25 years has been little or no innovation in the space. And that was because typically patients had to run to hard real endpoints to the kidney failed or the patient died. And of course that could take decades and thousands of patients. So companies didn't do it. So when a patient came to their doctor and they would say, they'd go through the process and the doctor would say to them, you've got kidney disease. But it doesn't matter which one because there's no treatment for any of them. So that's where the diagnosis stops. The biopsies were not being done. There was no point. As treatments are becoming available for the different types of kidney disease, there's been a number of products approved for a different type of rare kidney disease called IgA nephropathy. There's also some products approved for diabetic kidney disease now as well. With these products becoming available, there are doctors now saying, okay, now it's worth finding out which kidney disease you've got.
Yeah.
So what we are seeing is that biopsy rates are increasing as the education is out there, and the biopsy rates are increasing. So FSGS, for example, is growing by over 5,000 new patients every year in the US alone.
Got it. How much of this comes down to bandwidth in the medical system to actually diagnose it?
Well, I think some does come down to the medical system of being readily available for biopsy. And again, put that into perspective, Australia has the fastest growing rate of FSGS in the world. That is not because we have more FSGS, it's simply because Australia has the most liberal approach to biopsy. The doctors are very proactive in Australia in getting a diagnosis. Where the complete extreme is Japan, for example, where biopsy rates were really low. Mm-hmm. But that means that part of that education piece is to educate the physicians in Japan that you need to do the diagnosis, find out if they've got this disease, because then we can help you with the treatment. And that is why our partner in Japan is so fantastic. Fuso, we're actually the inventors of dialysis fluids. And that means that they actually have an existing relationship with all the kidney units throughout Japan and can actually start that education piece now ahead of an approval, potential approval in this indication.
So obviously you're going after a global market, but when you look at emerging economies, let's say like India and China, which collectively have half the world's population, how much of the problem do you think is still undiagnosed? Like, what's the scale?
Yeah, interestingly, China is a classic example where they actually have very good healthcare system. And so diagnosis is very high. And FSGS is not a rare disease in China.
Okay.
Too many patients.
Really?
And that in itself makes it a very attractive opportunity. To your point, Asia-Pac really has 60% of the global population. And that really is an opportunity for companies like Dimerix to really help these patients. You know, FSGS is a disease per capita that's fairly uniform throughout the world. Now, there is a slightly higher incidence in black men, but generally per capita it's quite uniform around the world. And that means that's an opportunity for us to be able to help these patients around the world. Now, put that into commercial terms, of course, any sale is a royalty back to Dimerix and helps our shareholders as well. So it's a fantastic opportunity. We've licensed a number of territories, US, Europe, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Middle East, and Japan at the moment. But there's still a large part of the world left to license, and that is our intention. This trial I mentioned earlier is running in 21 countries.
Yeah.
We've had the headache of negotiating with 21 regulators around the world.
Yeah.
But the upside is we've negotiated with 21 regulators around the world. And that means that now that this one trial is if successful, approvable in those territories. And that gives us a huge advantage, including those territories of China, Japan, Latin America, where we can go into.
Are there any other trials happening in this space right now?
So there was a phase 3 trial running with a different product called sparsentan. It actually finished in 2023, but unfortunately failed its primary endpoint, which was EGFR, which is essentially kidney function.
Yeah.
And that product is looking to resubmit at the moment. On face value, actually it looked like it was helping patients, so it would be a really good thing for these patients. And the great thing for us is that is essentially working on the blood pressure user.
Yeah.
So works very nicely with our product, is interchangeable with the background standard of care that exists right now, and therefore could be on the background with the DMX 200. And we think, you know, if they get an approval, it could be a big opportunity for us in that they can help grow the market as well.
Yeah, so you would co-administer that product.
Doctors would co-prescribe the product.
Got it. And then the endpoint that you're looking at is proteinuria.
So we look at EGFR and proteinuria. And put into perspective, EGFR means estimated glomerular filtration rate. It is essentially kidney function. How many mils per minute is your kidney filtering? For perspective, when we're born as babies, we have an EGFR of about 120, and every day we sit here in our lives, it's declining.
Yeah.
But most of us will be long gone from this earth before it ever intersects with kidney failure.
Yeah.
With FSGS patients, it's crashing. It's coming down really fast, and from diagnosis to kidney failure is typically less than 5 years. So what we're looking at with EGFR is, can we move that slope, that trajectory, to give patients life and time with their kidney? So 3 years on the life of a kidney is the potential. The other one we measure, to your point, is proteinuria, which is literally protein in the urine. Now, in a healthy individual, the kidney is a really good filter. So there should be little or no protein spilling from the blood into the urine. But when the kidney gets damaged, like FSGS, you end up with quite a leaky filter, and you end up with protein spilling from the blood into the urine, and that's proteinuria. The amount of protein in the urine is a measure of how fast is your kidney disease progression.
Okay.
So if you can reduce the amount of protein in the urine, it says you are slowing down kidney disease. So that's what we're measuring. EGFR, changing that slope, and proteinuria, are we reducing protein in the urine?
So on that then, how much of an impact does diet have? So if let's say I'm a carnivore and you're vegan, will the proteinuria be different?
So what we do is we measure obviously with baseline.
Yeah.
So you've got a baseline for each individual patient, and that you're monitoring throughout. Now, to your point, diet can influence in short-term proteinuria variables. So, for example, if you ate a high salt content, that can artificially influence your protein in the urine. But that is why we don't do what's called spot urines. We actually do what's called a 24-hour urine, because then it means that you're collecting your urines over 24 hours. So it balances out the food intake.
Yeah, okay. So everybody's frame of reference is different, effectively. Got it. Going back to 2020 then, once the diabetic kidney disease, let's say, doesn't need the primary endpoint and you have this crash in stock, what's the mood like at a board level? And what's that for you personally? What's that time in your life like for you personally?
So I don't think, the board's always been incredibly supportive. We've been very lucky. Dimerix has a really, really strong board, all the different skill sets represented. And so I get a lot of support from the Dimerix board, which has been fantastic. And so I think, mood from board and from management internally was probably more frustration because there was a sense of, no, this data is good data. But because, the investors were looking for something else, and there was a certain amount of frustration in what they could perceive and see there. I think the biggest frustration for me is over the years is often, just helping investors understand what we've got. Unfortunately, anything to do with financial money makes people emotional. And the only time I ever hear from an investor is if they're upset, angry, frustrated. I never hear from them if they're happy.
Don't I know it?
I know. So it is a frustration because when we go through those times, there's a lot of angst from investors. I understand that. But even now, there's something that happens in the macro environment and shares come crashing down all around the world. I still get a lot of sometimes angry, frustrated, upset investors asking me personally, what am I going to do about the global situation? And it is challenging because, I understand the frustration. I'm a shareholder too. I'm a shareholder in a number of other stocks as well. But it is something, that it's difficult to manage sometimes.
Yeah. Are you impacted much by tariffs and all of that?
Not at the moment, and I think this is somewhat fortuitous. We actually manufacture both our active ingredient and our finished product in the US.
Yeah, okay.
And so that's already been scaled up for commercial scale. So we don't really have any of that impact for Dimerix. And of course, even with the pricing side of things, at the moment, under their Pharmaceutical Act, orphan drugs are exempt from negotiation.
Okay.
But even if they weren't, in rare types of kidney disease, when you look at other products, not FSGS, but different types of rare kidney disease, the pricing differentials between, say, Europe, US, are actually not that different. So it's not a big impact for us.
That is huge margins in these products.
There can be, in particular because it's a small molecule we use. This is a capsule that's given twice daily, one in the morning, one in the evening. So really simple dosing regime.
Yeah.
But part of this is to recognise when you think about the margin and what we're looking at, the pricing here, is because the amount of the cost of developing this product from inception all the way to market can be hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to recoup that with a smaller number of patients. There are not that many patients. And that is why you get the higher pricing.
Yeah, that makes sense. It costs about between, $200 and $300 million to bring product to market?
On average. And some are higher and some are lower.
Yeah. Let's talk about deal making in biotech. I think you've done an amazing job. I think it's about $1.5 billion in licensed deals so far. And about 65 million of that's come in to the bank in form of cash.
Yes.
Fabulous job. Obviously, given that you're about 350 odd million market cap at this stage, I still think super undervalued. I bought my first share at 8 cents and I haven't sold a share since. I've exercised all my options. What's that experience been like?
Yeah, I think this is where I've been very, very fortunate in that I've, in my career, done a number of commercial deals in prior companies as well, through my Acrex days, as well as my Immuron days, through to my Dimerix days. And so there is a certain core expertise in understanding commercial and the need. And I think this was coming into, when I joined in 2018, and we spoke about this earlier, came in at 2018 and looked at what we had. I said at that time, we want to get partners, but to do that, we need to do all these different things. And I had an image that looked a bit like a dartboard, actually, with the things around the side that we needed to achieve. And what's been amazing over the number of years is we've done every single one of those things, and what did we get? The partners. And so I think this has been a fantastic outcome for the whole company, for everybody involved. But for me personally as well in negotiating those, because it really validates the technology, but also the people. We've actually got a team that is very capable of delivering on this, and I think that's put us in a really strong position. To your point, this is actually quite rare in this industry. There's not many companies that do these commercial licensing deals, out-licensing deals. And so it's put us in a very strong position to continue on the clinical trial.
So what do you tell your investors when they ring you up and they're frustrated and they're angry and they say, Nina, Trump's gone and said something on the news and now we want to sell Dimerix stock fundamentally nothing's changed and you've done this outstanding job of bringing so much value into the company. What do you tell them?
Well, I can't advise them at all, to be honest with you. We are not financial advisors. I cannot tell somebody when to buy and sell a share. That is entirely on them and their personal circumstances. But, to that point, ultimately, all I can talk about is what we're doing, where we're heading. For a lot of these things, there's noise in the background. If there's noise in the sector and it impacts us, we just need to keep doing what we're doing and make sure the message is clear to investors that we're still doing what we're doing and we're not impacted by the noise in the background. But I think for me, one of the things that I've learned over the years is to make sure that I can compartmentalize. When I've had, and there have been circumstances over the many years, not just at Dimerix, in prior companies as well, where I've dealt with some pretty aggressive investors. It's not enjoyable. But I can't take that home. I had young children then as well. You've got to be able to compartmentalize and switch that off, turn into mum mode, or whatever you need to be for that evening, and then deal with it later on. And I think I've always gone through that philosophy of, can I change it right now? Can I do something about it right now? And if I can't do something about it right now, then I don't need to stress about it right now. And so there is an ability for me to be able to switch it off. I don't have generally trouble sleeping at night. There are the odd exception, like when I'm waiting for data, knowing it's coming out that night. But generally speaking, I've managed to compartmentalize.
That's great. I read a quote, I remember was probably a few years ago. I think it was Plato, and I might be butchering it here, but it said the man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than necessary. And that's something that stuck with me.
I think that's fair.
Right. So when we're now sitting in December 2025, this episode's going to come out around Jan. What's 2026 look like? It's a big year for you.
Yes, it is. We've got a number of key inflection points even before the end of this year. We're currently waiting for the FDA outcome, discussion with the FDA. Then we look at our blinded analysis. Then we have a decision on any unblinding potential for accelerated approval. And before the end of the year, we're looking at full recruitment of the study as well. And all of these factors are massive inflection points for the business.
Yeah. You're doing a few other things. You're wearing a few hats. I believe you're on 3 other boards at the moment?
2 other boards.
2 other boards.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about that.
Yes, so I'm on the board of a company called Imagine Biosystems. This is a company that's looking at diagnostics in cancer. And I think that's a phenomenal opportunity. It's early stage. It's looking to open an IND in the coming term, as well as move into a phase 2 clinical trial. So I think that's a really good opportunity where I think I can really add that value. Bear in mind, I'm non-executive in that role, but add that value around, what pieces of the puzzle need to be put into play if they are looking to partner these activities, as well as which, activities need to be done from a clinical perspective, and then the holes are filled as we go as well. So there's that piece. The other role, which is quite different, is I'm the chair of a company called Synthesis Bioventures, and this is a fund that is investing in early stage products, opportunities, companies, and the intention is to try and help these companies fund through to later stage without having to sell overseas or list on the stock exchange.
So put your investor hat on for a second. What do you look at when you look at early stage biotech companies? What are some of the fundamental things that make you go, I'm going to invest or not invest?
Well, the unique thing in my role on that board is, as chair of the board, I'm not the investment committee.
Sure.
So there is an investment committee that looks at, on a due diligence perspective, the science, the commercial, the fit, and they present the business case. And only if they approve of that does it come to the board, where we manage conflicts of interest, etc. But the key thing there is, when we're looking at any of these products, and I think there are a number of companies out there who don't do this, but every product should have a business case. It needs to be able to clear not just on the science, does the science make sense? Is there a strong scientific rationale of why this should work? The second part there is there a commercial need? And when we talk about commercial need, it's not just about, is there a product on market already or not? What else is in development ahead of you? Because if you're looking at a rare disease, for example, and there's nothing on market at the moment, but there are 5 products in phase 3 and you're about to start a phase 1, you're a bit behind the 8 ball unless you have a mechanism of action that is going to outgun everything else that's in development. So all of these pieces have to play in. And then, of course, the final piece is intellectual property. How is this going to be protected? I think, a lot of investors look at, does it have composition of matter? then does it have the method of use, and then does it have exclusivity? But I think, particularly putting my IP hat on, sometimes there's a misinterpretation of what's really important there. The key thing that most companies, when you're partnering, will be looking at is actually the exclusivity.
Okay.
Because the exclusivity is a guaranteed period you cannot be challenged. In contrast, when you're looking at composition and matter, or especially method of use as well, on its own, those things can be challenged, and you can end up in either a litigation, paragraph 4 litigation in the US, where you end up either winning, losing, or settling, and settling means you're getting the market access earlier.
Yeah.
Whereas exclusivity, they cannot challenge your patent, they can't enter the market, you're guaranteed that period without being challenged.
Which is what, 20 years?
No, so in the US at the moment, for a standard product, it's 5 years.
Yeah.
For an orphan, it's 7 years.
Yeah.
In Europe, it's 7 years, but you can get 10 years with an orphan.
10 years, yeah. That's right.
And you can extend it with a pediatric component as well.
Yeah.
So the patents are 20 years. So we think of Dimerix 200, the Dimerix candidate. We have patents that are granted to 2033.
Yeah.
We have exclusivity in all of those territories with orphan designation as well. And then we have patent applications in that could extend that to 2042 as well.
And so if I'm an investor and I'm looking at, let's say, a company that's gone from phase 1, that had a successful phase 1, and now they've gone to a phase 2. In my experience over the last, say, 12 to 24 months, licensing conversations have been kicked down the road a bit. So drugs that were getting licensed out, post phase 1, pre-phase 2, are now getting in data rooms in phase 2. What can I, as an investor, look towards when I'm reviewing phase 2 data, if it's available, or if a company is raising capital to go into a phase 2 study?
I think some of it is around, what's achievable, what's doable, and every product is different, every indication is different. So, you take example of FSGS versus diabetic kidney disease, for example.
Yeah.
FSGS study, it's an orphan indication in a smaller subset of patients, 286 patients, what we're targeting for that one. It's a study we can do. We can fund that, and we have the expertise, and we can do that. And then you look at something like diabetic kidney disease, completely different, where you're looking at 2 large phase 3 clinical trials. You're looking at thousands of patients. It's going to take a long time. We could not fund that necessarily. So I think part of that process, when we're looking at products and what, as an investor, what can we bring this through to, is the company capable of doing this?
Yeah.
Now, that then determines where's the licensing opportunity. This doesn't mean it's not a good idea. It just means, when do you need help? And then the other part is how are they planning that? So just because we can't do the phase 3 doesn't mean we haven't mapped out what does it look like? How much does it cost?
Yeah.
What needs to be done before we get to that, and then during that? Because in any negotiation with a party that you know, licensing opportunity, the other side needs to know, what are we asking them to do? What are they going to be putting in? So we might sit here and say, we think this indication's worth, $1 billion.
Yeah, sure.
But by the time they've done the development, the phase 3, the costs, the sales and marketing activities, they've eroded so much of that value in the money they've actually got to plug in. So it's just making sure that you've got line of sight from it to the end goal. What does it look like? Yeah,
sure. So I suppose you want to look at it more from a life cycle standpoint rather than just an isolated.
It's not just about the bit you're doing.
Yeah.
It's about where's it going to be at the end. What needs to be done? Understanding that. Like I said, it doesn't mean that we have to do it.
Yep.
It means we have to thought about what does a phase 3 look like? What does sales and marketing look like? What does the prescribing habits look like? Reimbursement is a classic. Too many companies do not look at reimbursement till the very end.
Yep.
You need to build that in at the beginning. You need to know that this is a product that could be reimbursed, it could be prescribed, it's going to be on the national formularies in the US, which tier product, which was the copay going to be, because otherwise it's a challenge to build it in later on, you might miss your market.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in what we're doing, we typically look at, so as I mentioned, when we're investing in life sciences, the preference is to look at orphan designated drugs that can either have CPT codes or can fit into an existing CPT code that have obviously a pathway to licensing. With respect to investments, because you're doing a few investments at the moment, you've got your own portfolio, but I love also chatting to you just around some of the big trends that you're seeing. What are some of the trends that you're seeing in biotech that make you think this is going to be big over the next decade?
Yeah, and I'm going to put a caveat on this at the very beginning, because for somebody who works in this industry, I'm actually incredibly risk adverse. So my husband does all the investing and looks after the portfolio. I just pike in from time to time, but I can't manage that. I wouldn't be able to cope. So there is a different perspective. But I think, biotech in particular has a really strong opportunity in Australia. We are getting that experience. We have a number of companies that have seen some of that success. You mentioned before Telix, Neuron. We've got these companies that are seeing products to market, becoming successful, and that feeds success into the industry, and it builds that expertise and experience. You think of what we talked about before with the original ACRAX team. It built a number of really experienced and talented individuals that have all spun out to do really good, promising things. And so my idea here is that, Neuron, Dimerix, we're all now going to spit out our own again. And the next generation comes in with the skills and the expertise. So the Dimerix team, I have to say, is phenomenal. I think they will definitely achieve great things in their future.
Very good. Neuron's, I look at Neuron right now, and just where it's at, it looks really cheap. Given the amount of cash and some of the indications that they're looking at the moment, I think now it's about $19 or so, but it dropped just down to $10, I think, around 6 months ago. And I did buy some more. And we were obviously fortunate enough from a peak standpoint to ride that Neuron wave when it happened. Where we got in, I think it was at around probably between $1.10 to $1.50 after the Acadia transaction came out and the stock fell. And it's funny because I looked at that, and when your partner came out, Amicus, it just rang a bell in my head, because I was looking at the true transactions on parallel, and there are quite a few parallels. But looking sort of outside in, when you look at areas that you're investing, or even areas that maybe you might be looking into from a reading standpoint or coming across, what are some of the indications, or broadly speaking, some of the thematics within life sciences that you think are big problem areas and that investors might not know?
Oh gosh, that's an interesting question. I think one of the things that is in a really interesting space at the moment is diagnostics generally, and in particular diagnostics with AI.
Yeah.
Because I will say I'm a technophone, so don't ask me any questions in detail on this. But the general principle there that the AI can really help with either the diagnosis or even the treatment prognosis, I think is phenomenal. And so I think that's a real opportunity for growth in that space at the moment, and probably under represented or understood.
Yeah. Have you looked into quantum?
No, not specifically.
Yeah. I actually want to try and figure this out a bit more, because I was just doing a bit of reading around how quantum might change drug discovery. It's a really interesting space.
Yeah, I think, and there's two elements of it, in the, let's call it immediate future.
Yeah.
Who knows what's in the future? We all see Star Trek. But you think of we talk about the diagnosis piece, which is, it could have a fit for AI at the moment, diagnostics AI fit. The other part is designing clinical trials. It could really help with some of the design and get the best outcome of the clinical trials. I don't think it's there yet in being able to analyze the data yet for us. And interpret correctly what that could mean.
Yeah.
But there could be something there in the future. I don't know. But at the moment, I see it very much in the diagnostics and in design.
Yeah. Is that why you...
And to your point, drug discovery.
So is that why you joined IDX? Was that one of the things that interested you?
That's an element of it. I think the main thing as well was I see a lot of it resonated very well in what they need to achieve, what they need to get there, and where I think I can help them, point them in the right direction for that.
Your appointment, the day was announced, I think they didn't market it price sensitive. I remember because it happened to be the day before we had our conference where you presented.
Yes.
And I remember somebody messaged me and said, "Oh, have you looked at this announcement?" And I was like, "Oh, wow, that's interesting." I was interested to see how come you've joined the board of, I think at the time it was a 10 million market cap or something like that.
I think it was 6 million the day I joined.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, ASX has determined it's not price sensitive.
Yeah.
But clearly it was. It was jumped up in price.
And I'm happy because I bought some. So, that's amazing. So This show's called On-Ramp, and the reason it's called On-Ramp is because it's an on-ramp to a knowledge highway for me and hopefully anybody that listens. But more so because I think that for a lot of people starting out that on the highway that you're on, for example, there might be on-ramps for you that take you on other highways, and there might be on-ramps for people that want to do what you're doing. So I might ask you two questions. First is if you could go back in time and give some advice to, let's say, your 30-year-old self. What would you say to her?
I'd say believe in myself is a key one, but the other part is do not underestimate the value of networking. Mm-hmm. I think in my early career, I felt in particular I was looking at the global opportunities. I'm going to be licensing this stuff overseas. And so my relationships were very focused overseas. But actually, it's your Australian network that gives you the fundamental support and career growth, etc. So I think it's been a really important learning for me is really value that networking opportunity in Australia. And I think the other part is the value of your mentors. So I was very fortunate. I did have 2 mentors in Australia, and that, periodically we would catch up and I would bounce things off them and they would give me some advice over the years, and they've been phenomenal. And they are Sue McClellan, you may be familiar with, has been on a number of different boards. She's been phenomenal since I first came to Australia. She's supported my career growth. And the second will be Dr. Igor Gonda, again, really backed me from early days in my career and saw in me some capability to deliver more.
Yeah, and Sue lives, I think she lives, they're in the Highlands in New South Wales.
In Le Palm.
Yes, it's amazing. I spoke to Paul recently. He says he's the only vet for a few hundred kilometers around his area. Yes. So, and my second question is, you've done so many things. You've been a basketball coach, you've been a bus driver, you've been a scuba instructor. You've had an amazing career in life sciences. You're doing some really important work, and you're leading probably the hottest bot company on the ASX at the moment. What's your next on-ramp look like?
Gosh, that is a really good question. I think that for me, it's feeding it back in, giving on. And that aspect of the mentorship that I got out of both Sue and through Igor, that gave me such a career opportunity, growth, advice. And now it's trying to feed that back in and help individuals. So that is where I join boards like Imagion and Synthesis, is being able to, all my learnings across, I think I've touched every part of the industry, is being able to feed that in at a higher level. Now, with my day job at Dimerix, there's no way I could take on more than 2 board roles. Yeah. So that's my opportunity at the moment. But that's really where I think I add that value, is helping now the next generation come through as well.
That's amazing. Well, Nina, thank you so much for joining us and doing this. I've always enjoyed all of our conversations, and here's hoping for peak 2026 for Dimerix. I sure will be happy because I'm a shareholder.
Thank you, Ali. I really appreciate your time too. Thank you.
Thank you.